Oklahoma Gardening is a production of the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the land grant mission of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University, dedicated to improving the quality of life of the citizens of Oklahoma through research-based information. Southwood Landscape and Garden Center, Tulsa's source for great gardens, southwoodgardencenter.com, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping to keep Oklahoma green and growing. Welcome to Oklahoma Gardening. On today's show, host Casey Hinches has an easy method to figure out how many plants that you need to fill that empty bed. We build a simple concrete decorative planter. Casey talks with Extension Wildlife Specialist Dwayne Elmore about problem plants. And Barbara Brown has tips for selecting the correct tomato, as well as a simple fresh tomato sauce.
Garden bed or an annual bed that you regularly plant, you're probably starting to ask yourself a question. How many plants do I need to fill this bed? Buy too many and you're out some money. Buy too few and you're having to return back to the nursery. When I worked for commercial landscaping, we had these huge annual flower beds that we had to plant. And it was critical that we got the right number of plants we needed each year because we were talking about large amounts of money. And we had nurseries that grew exactly how many plants we needed. So we were going to have to buy them whether we ended up using them or not. Now in this situation, we're obviously talking about a little bit smaller of a scale, but it's the exact same process. You're going to use a planting chart to figure out how many plants you need based off of the area of the bed. The first thing we need to do is figure out the area. Now for a rectangle like this, what you're going to do is measure the length times the width of the bed. So here our length is 14 feet long, and then our width is 2 feet. So 2 feet times 14 feet gives us an area, total area for this planting bed of 28 square feet. So 28 is our square foot area for this particular bed. Now you do the length times the width for a rectangle, but if you have a circle, you're going to use the radius of that circle, multiply it times itself, and then times the number pi, or 3.14, and that will give you the area of a circular bed. If you have an irregular shaped bed, then you're going to divide that up between rectangles, squares, and circles, and then calculate all those areas, add them together to get your total planting area for that irregular shaped bed. So here we have 28 square feet. This is our area of our bed. We know our area is 28 square foot. Let's say we're going to plant some annuals that need to be 6 inches apart, and for that we're going to need 4 plants per square foot. So we'll multiply our 28 times 4, and that gives us 112 plants that we'll need to purchase. Let's say you're going to plant your plants 12 inches apart. In that case, you would do your square foot area of 28 times 1 plant, which would tell you that you need to purchase 28 plants. Now again, this is just a bit of a rough estimate, and you might want to go ahead and buy a couple because you never know what the weather or animals and pests might bring and damage some of your plants, so it's nice to have a few extra. But this is a great way to figure out how many plants you might need. Now this planting chart, if you notice, it is based off of the spacing of the plants. We don't talk about any particular type of plant. So that's why it tends to work best with annuals that you might be spacing so far apart. You could mix those annuals if you know that they're going to be on the same spacing. Also, it can work with perennials if you're going to plant those perennials in mass, and again, they rely upon the same spacing. Now again, this is just a rough estimate. You might want to go ahead and buy a few in case you have bad weather that damages some of them or pests come in. You never know. Besides, it doesn't always hurt to have just a few extra plants. Y'all probably have learned that I enjoy repurposing things, especially those things that are taking up a little bit of space in your garage or your garden. And one thing that I often find in gardens is some old spare pavers that might be lying around. Either they were left over from a previous owner or a previous project. But usually they're just a few, not enough to make a sidewalk, but just enough to take up space. Well, if you have 4 or 5 pavers, we might have a cheap and easy way to make a durable container. In addition to about 4 or 5 pavers, you're going to also need a few large clamps. You can do this project with just 2, but it also helps to have a couple more, so you might need 4 total. Then you're also going to need some paver glue as well as a caulk gun. And that's all really the equipment, the tools that you'll need in order to do this. Now, it works best if you have equally sized pavers, but if you don't, it is still doable. What you're going to do is get 2 of these and put them up on end. And we're going to start out by gluing one side of the paver. We're just going to press those together. Now for our third paver that we're going to add, you want to make sure that you're doing this in a pinwheel fashion. So that one butted up to this one, so this one will now butt up to our third paver. So we'll apply the glue to this outside of the second one. Now when you have your clamps, again, it's best to have 4 because this way you can put a clamp on each joint so that it holds it and makes it solid and allows it to dry. If you were to clamp the middle, what happens is these pavers tend to creep in on you, and so they won't be a perfect square again. So we're going to put this right there in the middle. And we'll work our way around the sides this way. All right, so now we have our clamps all on there and we've got a nice square shape. If you did only have 2 clamps, you could do the same thing. You would just need to do it in stages and allow it to cure, then remove the clamps and add more sides to it. So after we have this, we've got our next stage, and you can see this one is already cured. It's solid and it's holding together. The problem is we still need to put a bottom on it. You could use this if you only had 4 pavers and you plan on using it as a container that is on soil or in a garden. It would work just fine. But for us, we're actually going to put a bottom on it so that we don't lose our soil as we plant it on concrete or on a patio. So we're going to take one more paver and we'll need to just glue it. While it looks like the top, we'll then flip it over and it will be the bottom. Sure that's centered up a little bit. And the natural weight will keep that pressed down as it cures. And so we can just leave it like that for a couple of days. We're joined again by Dr. Dwayne Elmore, who is our Extension Specialist for Natural Resource Ecology and Management. And Dr. Elmore, you know, as we go into the summer months, a lot of times we start looking at our landscape and thinking we need to add some plants. But you wanted to let us know about some horticulture plants that are causing pest problems, correct?
Correct.
So what are some of those? One we've got right here behind us that we're starting to see more and more.
Yeah, Bradford pear or Callery pear is becoming a huge problem, especially in eastern Oklahoma, where it's naturalizing into what was formerly open prairie and converting it to a woodland of exotic pear.
Our landscapes are becoming more white with these flowers versus our natural native red buds.
Yeah, and the red bud is a great alternative. If somebody wants kind of a small to medium tree that's very drought hardy, that has nice spring color, and one that's a lot more resistant to ice damage, then I would choose a red bud over the exotic pear.
So people are planting Callery pears in their front yards and not realizing the causes and effects that they're having out in the native area. And this is what's happening because of that one that a homeowner might have planted in their yard?
Yeah, and the birds disperse the fruit, and this one is a feral pear that's gotten out from someone's landscape via seed. So what you're planting in your landscape is affecting, the neighbors and the larger landscape and a lot of wildlife and native plant species.
So what are some other horticulture plants that we tend to think are great landscape plants, but they really are causing problems in the natural areas?
So several of the vines are really problematic. English ivy, the wisterias, and Japanese honeysuckle are all highly invasive and are naturalized over large parts of the eastern United States. And there's great native alternatives that you can use instead. Things like trumpet creeper and Virginia creeper are readily available and are very attractive and aren't invasive.
And it's funny because we know that Virginia creeper, a lot of times people confuse that with poison ivy, and it's not. It's a completely harmless plant. It won't cause a skin irritation. It has beautiful fall foliage. It turns bright red, and it's used a lot over in Europe, but we kind of underappreciate it because it just grows wild here.
Yeah, if it has 5 leaves, it's not poison ivy. Poison ivy has 3. So it has 5 leaf, compound leaf, nice foliage as you mentioned, good shape. It's very attractive to wildlife, and it produces a lot of fruit.
Okay, and some of the plants also that we're concerned with are water hyacinth and yellow iris. Some of our water plants are causing problems.
If you have a water garden, be real particular about the plants you're using, because several of those can escape and get into streams and clog waterways, and some of these plants cause just billions of dollars of damage in the United States every year in our rivers and streams.
They're actually, I've heard, preventing ships from getting through canals in some situations.
That's true.
And they've been banned in some of the southern states where they don't die out every year, but we're starting to see that problem in our southern part of the state also.
Yeah, Oklahoma, we're on a real big transition between a humid climate and a dry western climate, so we're kind of on the edge of where some of these species are invasive, but a lot of them we don't know yet how invasive they can be. 10 years ago, people didn't think Bradford pear was a problem, and now people are starting to look around and say it's everywhere. So that's the problem with a lot of these invasives, is we don't always know the potential of these plants. So use a native when you can, or using proven plants that have shown that they do not naturalize in the landscape.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us. And if you want to know more about some of these horticulture pest plants before you go plant your landscape, check out this fact sheet for alternative plants you might want to use. now that we've given it a little time, our glue has cured, and so we've already flipped it over, so now we have a solid bottom in this paver pot. And at this point, we're ready to plant. I do want to mention first, though, if you're concerned about the drainage, because the bottom paver basically covers the whole bottom area, concrete is porous, so we're going to lose some of the water out the sides. Plus, our glue caulking has holes in it as well, so we're going to lose some water out the sides also. But if you are concerned and you're planting something that maybe needs a little bit more drainage, you can actually offset that bottom paver to allow for more pore space that will allow more drainage. Anytime you're planting a container, you want to make sure to use fresh potting soil and not topsoil. Topsoil tends to be too heavy and not drain as well as potting soil, which is a little bit lighter of a mix. Fresh potting soil will ensure that you don't have any diseases that you might be harboring from the previous season. So that's why we always encourage people to go out and get fresh potting soil and put that old potting soil in your compost pile. So now that we're ready to start planting, we're going to add some potting soil in here. You always want to think about what plants you're going to use in your container. And when you're doing this, where is your container going to go in the garden? Will it be going in the sunny garden, or will it be going in a shady location? This is important because you want to make sure to choose plants that like the same environment. You don't want to put a sun plant next to a shade plant because one of those is not going to survive. Also, you want to think about the water requirements for the plants that you choose. You want to make sure to get plants that need the same amount of water because, again, as you water it, one of them will live, but the other one won't. Here we've chosen a few different plants. When you're getting your plants, another thing you've probably heard about is getting a thriller, a spiller, and a filler. For our thriller, we've got this New Zealand flax that we're going to use. Ornamental grasses make a great thriller. It's something that's usually larger and helps kind of balance out the size of the pot. This is something that will go in the middle if you want to be seen by all sides, or it'll go towards the back if you're going to put it against a wall. Now for our spiller, we want something that's going to kind of weep and trail over the container. So here we've got a petunia, and this one we're going to add to the front of our container here. And so you can see as that grows through the season, it's just going to drape over the front and soften those edges. Then finally we need our filler. And for our filler we're using pentas, which are a great butterfly plant. You can see in this particular container we've kind of played with the pinks and the purple color hues. So this penta, you always want to make sure to tease those roots a little bit. We're going to put one on each side here. Now these pentas are going to continue to get a little bit taller while this petunia is going to drape over the front of this. This container is really meant to be seen from this front side because we're going to put it against a wall. You can see here it's a great combination of the colors, and it's a nice durable container. Now one thing also, if you wanted to, you could even use an exterior paint and paint this container if you wanted a different color rather than the typical concrete look. But this is a nice durable container that you can put anywhere in the garden that's for sure not to blow away.
When you're deciding which kind of tomato to plant or which kind of tomato to buy, it's important to have some kind of a clue what you want to do with it. As you can see, these are the ones that I got from the market today. And most of these tomatoes are going to be for slicing. All of them are going to be good, so that's not the question. But again, if you're making a tomato sauce with them and you're going to be cooking with them in some way, it does make a difference. So let's look at a little bit and see what we've got. I've got a Roma tomato, which we often refer to as a cooking tomato, and the rest of them are basically slicing tomatoes or grape tomatoes. This one is a slicing tomato. So let's look at what's the difference when we cut into them and see what we can see. Now, both of them aren't peak of maturity yet. I probably would like to see them on the vine a little bit more. But what you can see here is this one has a lot more liquid. in it. You can see more juice, more seeds. This one's got much thicker walls than this one does, and that means that when we're cooking, we are going to get a thicker sauce with it. When you're canning, this is more the kind of tomato that you're going to want to use so that you don't have that separation during the cooking process. So I'm going to show you what happens here. We're going to make a sauce real quick. It's a raw sauce, real easy to make. You don't have to peel the tomatoes, you just need to wash them and core them and cut them in a rough chop, cut them into chunks. Put them in your blender. You could do this in a food processor as well. So I've got about a pound of tomatoes, which with this size is about 4. And I'm going to add a tablespoon of olive oil. And here you probably want to have one that's got a little bit of flavor to it. 3/4 of a teaspoon of kosher salt, about the same amount, 3/4 of a teaspoon of pepper. And then I'm going to add a 1/2 teaspoon of, or 3/4 of a teaspoon of sugar to that as well. And that's just to cut the acid that's in the tomato a little bit. You could leave it out and see how it is. And then 1½ teaspoons of balsamic vinegar. And that's all the ingredients that you need. Now you can make this and eat it over a fresh pasta in a salad. You could serve it as a sauce, or you could cook it just a little bit by putting it over hot pasta in a pan and let it sit there for a minute. You want to sort of puree this. The amount that you do is going to depend on how chunky you like your sauce. Let's see if I can get that going a little bit stronger. Or not. Okay, I think that's good for what we're going to do today. What I have here, as I said, if you were actually going to serve this warm, you'd put it in the pot that you just cooked the macaroni in, put the macaroni back in the pot and pour some of the sauce over it. This makes enough to work with about 4 ounces of pasta. I don't have that amount here, so I'm not going to put all of it over it. This is going to be cold, but it would be equally good if it was nice and hot. Just put about that much on, and then kind of spread it out. You would toss it together in the pot if you were actually working with it hot, so all of the pasta would be coated. How this tastes is going to be totally dependent on how ripe those tomatoes were. So this is the kind of thing you do during the peak of season. But let's look a little bit further and see what happens. I made the same sauce 2 ways. What you can see here is this is the one that I made with a cooking tomato. We have some of the liquid coming off, but basically it's still more mounded. What we have here is one that's made from a slicing tomato. A lot more water has come off of this. It's still flavored, it's still good, but the sauce is going to be much thinner. So depending on what you're going to do or what your goal is, you may want to choose one over the other. It's that easy. For Oklahoma Gardening, this is Barbara Brown.
are lots of great horticultural events this time of year. Be sure and consider these activities when you're making your plans for the weeks ahead. Next week, Casey keeps our tools clean and shiny. And we travel to Edgemere Park in Oklahoma City, where the neighborhood is working alongside city and state agencies and the Oklahoma City Community Foundation to preserve this historic green space. Be sure and join us next week for more TV You'll Grow to Love. To find out more information about show topics, as well as recipes, videos, articles, fact sheets, and other resources, including a directory of local extension offices, be sure and visit our website, oklahomagardening.okstate.edu. And we always have great information, answers to questions, photos, and gardening discussions on your favorite social media as well. Join in on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find this entire show and other recent shows, as well as individual segments on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. And tune in to our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel to watch segments from previous hosts. Oklahoma Gardening is produced by the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University. The Botanic Garden at OSU is home to our studio gardens, and we encourage you to come visit this beautiful Stillwater jewel. We wish to thank our generous underwriters, Southwood Landscape and Garden Center, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry. Additional support is provided by Pond Pro Shops, Greenleaf Nursery and the Garden Debut Plants, and the Oklahoma Horticultural Society. We hope you enjoyed this video. It's part of our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. You can also find even more videos on our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.